at Junction Reads with Margaret Nowaczyk. I'm so excited to talk about Chasing Zebras, her memoir, and I'm glad that you were able to join us. Before we get started, I will share a land acknowledgement. Kaylee and I are currently in Toronto. Margaret is in Hamilton, so I will say that we are in Tekaronto, which for thousands of years has been the traditional land of the Wyandot Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and most recently the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. It is still a home to many Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island, and we are very grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on their territory. Margaret, welcome back to Junction Reads, a little different than the last time we saw each other, but I'm so grateful that you were here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, it's an incredible memoir. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I hope other people did as well. And if you didn't, we will have a raffle at the end. Wolsak and Wynn have generously donated 2 copies of the book. So you might walk away with your own copy today.
And I'm going to say that if you do, after today, order a book from Wolsak and Wynn and put in Junction Reads in the note, I will personally go down there and sign it for you.
Woo, that's exciting. That's awesome. Thanks for that. Before we get started and while we wait for everyone to join us slowly, I'm wondering if you could share with everyone what you are reading right now.
I have finished 2 books, well, most recently. One is Liberation Day, a new collection of short stories by George Saunders. I'll show it over here. And George Saunders, as always, delivers on the kindness, delivers on the humanity, delivers on all, and not to mention amazing writing, delivers on all fronts again. He returns to some of his old themes of human slavery that he did in his book, The 10th of September, which was almost 10 years ago now, came out. And also current political agendas or situation in the States, and some other wonderful stories as usual. And I love the man. I have all of his books, and this is just the most recent one that I've read, and I do recommend it. The other book that I finished reading, which is probably not going to be very useful to everybody, is this particular one. By the J in Empuzyon, you can see that this is actually a Polish book. It's the most recent novel from the Nobel Prize winning Olga Tokarczuk after her books of Jacob that has just come out. Now, a lot of her books have been translated. This is awaiting and probably will be translated within a few years. But you can read some of her other books, like the books of Jacob, which is at 950 pages. It weighs 1.5 tons, but it's totally worth reading every word in it. It's brilliant. And the other book that was translated is Flights, which won the International Booker Prize. And there's several other ones. For those who are not quite ready to jump into the deep waters with Tokarczuk, I would recommend a book which is written in the genre of a thriller, murder mystery, whichever the proper term is, which is called Drive Your Plow Through the Bones of the Dead, William Blake quote, which is an easy read, but it introduces you to some of her themes and her preoccupations. So the main one being cruelty against animals and being against that. So those are the 2 books. This one you can get in your local bookstore. This one, if you read Polish, you can also get it online. Thanks, Allison.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. George Saunders, also my absolute favorite. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to read it.
You'll love it.
I also cannot wait to hear you read from Chasing Zebras. This was such an impressive, both emotionally and as a writer, memoir for me to read, and I'm excited to hear your voice. But before I do that, do you mind if I share your biography with everybody?
Sure.
Margaret Nowaczyk immigrated to Canada from Poland when she was a teenager. With determination and intelligence, she graduated from medical school at the University of Toronto, followed by residencies at Toronto's Sick Kids until she settled in at McMaster University Hospital as a clinical geneticist. Her short stories and essays have appeared in many literary journals such as Prairie Fire, Geist, The New Quarterly, The Antigonish Review, Grain, and so many more. She co-edited Polished, an anthology of short stories from the Polish-Canadian diaspora released by Guernica Editions in 2017. She lives in Hamilton with her family. Chasing Zebras, her memoir of genetics, mental health, and writing was published by Wolsak and Wynn, and I'm so excited to say was shortlisted in 2 categories for the Hamilton Literary Award. Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very thrilled about it. I just found out last week. Thank you. So I will read a selection of fragments. Now, as you know from the subtitle, no, it's not a subtitle. What do you call it?
Oh,
the Memoir of Genetics and Mental Health and Writing. What do you call that? It's not a
subtitle.
Is it a subtitle? All of a sudden I thought of movie films. Anyway, so as you can tell from that, whatever it is called, there are several arcs in my memoir. One is my training as a geneticist. The other one is my issues with mental health and mental illness. And then what writing has done for me in both of those areas. But I want to take you on a different arc because there are several other arcs in there. And I'm going to take you on a different arc. And this is an arc of language. And my adventures and experiences with learning English. In spite of my 7 years of English classes, 2 of those in English immersion in Poland, and committing the painted veils vocabulary to heart, or maybe because of it, my English proved woefully inadequate for even the most mundane needs. On our 3rd day at the hotel, my mother sent me to buy lunch. Go right from the hotel, she told me. Cross 3 streets, maybe 4. The concept of city blocks does not exist in Polish. Then turn right on Young Street, the busiest street. You'll see a big yellow M sign. I completely missed Young Street and the Golden Arches and lumbered along Charles Street almost as far as University Avenue before I decided that a street lined with old stone buildings nested amid tall linden trees was no place for fast food restaurants. Little did I know that 2 years later, I would be admitted to Victoria College and get to enter those stately portals. Shamefaced, I backtracked and located Young Street after what felt like hours. The McDonald's there exuded its signature deep-fried reek. I grew wistful, remembering the same aroma from Baltic seaside restaurants during childhood holidays. I took my place at the end of the single line, snaking out from 4 cashiers. After years of lining up for food in Poland, I was a pro. Except that in Poland, there would have been 4 separate lines, and those condemned to the slowest would look daggers at the lucky ones who moved along to secure their goods. By comparison, this was the height of civility. The single line feeding into 4 sales points impressed the provincial immigrant me. When I reached the counter, my eyes settled on the silver flashing between the salesgirl's pink lips. Metal wires caged her top and bottom teeth. The previous summer in Poland, I had read The Godfather. Now I flashed back to Connie Corleone's wired jaw, broken by her no-good husband, Carlo. This poor girl's jaw must be broken, I thought. My heart beat wildly at such a crass display of Western degeneration. Eyes fixated on her mouth, I haltingly ordered 3 cheeseburgers. I was speaking English in Canada for the first time. Do you want French fries with that? She asked, metal flashing. No, not French fries, I said, just fries. I did not know what French fries were. The counter girl shrugged, stepped back to pick up 3 oily red pockets from under the heater, and dropped them on the tray in front of me. I checked the contents. Yes, those were the kind of fries I wanted. That's it? The girl asked. I had no idea what she meant. I beg your pardon? Is that it? I shook my head, my cheeks burning hot. Is this all you want? The man standing behind me prompted. Relief. Yes, I said. Yes, that is all I want. I paid for the order, barely able to tear my eyes from the girl's mouth, and squeezed through the crowd, feeling stupid and deflated. And the next part. I could read English without difficulty at school. I could read English without difficulty, obsessively looking up all the unknown words, and understood most of what was said. But expressing myself in English was a different story altogether. I would build an eloquent, complex sentence in my brain, grammatically correct and sophisticated, only to be betrayed by my tongue, lips, and larynx as they refused to conform to the new vowels and clusters of consonants. It was as if I were gagged with an invisible muzzle. At the time, I did not realize the full extent of the distress my muteness, my inability to communicate was causing me. I felt deficient and stupid, handicapped in my search for high marks and acceptance. My personality seemed flat and boring in my broken English, and I missed my sense of humor. The need to communicate resides in the limbic system, the reptile brain of humans that is responsible for emotions. Neural and emotional changes ensue when the desire to communicate is blocked. This can happen, for example, in people with aphasia, a loss of speech that can occur after a stroke. But such alterations also take place in immigrants, or to a lesser extent, tourists who do not know the language of their destination. My only means of expression were the letters that I wrote in Polish at least once a week to my friend Asia. There and then the floodgates opened. I would write 4 or 5 pages, sometimes more. In English, I remained functionally mute for 2 more years, and many more had to pass before I was able to play with words and phrases again. Even now, when the correct word materializes in my mouth, I am amazed that I can express myself effortlessly in English. I never take the ability to communicate in any language for granted. In my enforced English muteness, I missed telling jokes the most. Those one-line zingers that I had been notorious for back in Poland. I tried once, but I mispronounced lunatics so badly that my grade 12 biology classmates stared at me, bemused. A year later, having heard the word jerk on the Love Boat, I tried to use it ironically, but the expressions on my interlocutors' faces made it clear that I had once more botched the delivery. Several years later, however, when I attempted a pun that went over like a lead balloon, a colleague snarked, "It's obvious that English is your second language." But by then I could snap back. Actually, it's my third. I laugh much louder at jokes in Polish. They hit right in the middle of my being, just above my belly button. In an excellent essay in Polish on the conundrums of translating humor, Stanisław Barańczak, a critically acclaimed translator of Shakespeare, Donne, Dickinson, and Ogden Nash, discussed working on a translation of The Owl and the Pussycat by Edward Lear. As I read about his linguistic acrobatics, the original elicited a smirk. It was cutesy. Barańczak finished the essay with the product of his labors, and I guffawed. Loud, uninhibited belly laughter. The Polish translation hit me right between the eyes. Its apt hilarity went straight to my limbic system. Barańczak translated, and there in the wood a piggywig stood, into a hog sideways across the road. The word wieprz conjured a vivid image in my brain of a male pig in all its snouty, stubbly, pink hoggishness, something that hog had utterly and completely failed to do. And it stood sideways, not just across a road, but sideways across the road. English did not stand a chance. And I won't even mention the subtle irony and sophisticated humor of the Polish Nobel laureate in literature, Wisława Szymborska. English translation do not do her poetry justice. and heffalump. I laughed myself to tears the first time my father read Irena Tuvin's excellent pre-war translation of Winnie the Pooh. He choked on his laughter as he tried to read through his own hoots. The mere memory of swine, swaniacy, Piglet's squeals of heffalump still tickles 50 years later. When I bought the English original, I went straight to the chapter in which Piglet meets a heffalump. It disappointed. None of that visceral humor, none of the tears of laughter materialized. And more recently, Charci Pomiot sounded so much more menacing and sinister than Hagseed, Margaret Atwood's genius notwithstanding. And then many years later, I'm skipping about 20 years here, sort of a final bit to this arc. At about the same time, we were talking now 2001, and I had immigrated to Canada in 1981. At about the same time, I had reached another important milestone in my life. One day that spring, I was speaking on the phone with John Opitz, who had by that time become a friend. John Opitz is a world famous American geneticist, clinical geneticist. I was discussing a young man whom I had diagnosed with FG syndrome. We were winding down after discussing the patient's management, and John asked in his gravelly voice, heavy and Germanic, which I cannot do, "Do you still speak Polish?" A beat of hesitation, followed by a flash of insight, and pride. And I heard myself say, "I'm bilingual." The aptness of the word stunned me. After so many years of being ashamed and embarrassed by my accent and my linguistic deficiencies, I finally found the right word to describe myself. For the first time in my life, I owned it. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. I thought you were going to share the story of when you went back to Poland, which to me was also quite a moving experience when you sat down to have lunch with Asha, who you had been writing to for 20 years, and you recognized the split, I guess, and that you had in fact, without even knowing that you had in fact separated, not just from her, but from Poland and
Yes.
and from who you were. I thought that was beautiful. I wondered in that moment, the first thing that popped into my head when I was reading the section with Asha was, I wonder what your life would have been like if you had stayed. Asha turned into this dynamic single woman, from your impression, living the life, and I wonder if you have ever thought what life would be like if you had stayed.
The dilemma of every immigrant. We immigrants always think that there will never be an answer, but we do wonder that. What I had done, and I do mention it in the book, was I was 15 when I left Poland, 16 when I came to Canada. I didn't want to leave, and I made a very important decision, and so did my parents, not to be very close to the Polish community. So, for example, we didn't live near Roncesvalles. I didn't go to High Park Collegiate, where about 40% of kids were Polish at the time, especially after Solidarity. So there was a lot more of them. So I actually had no Polish-speaking friends in high school. We would go to church on Roncesvalles. We'd go to the store once a week, but that was it. We had very little connection with the Polish community. And it was my decision was, I'm not going to stand straddle the Atlantic with one foot in Canada, the other one in Poland, because leaving Poland in 1981 was a one-way ticket. We did not leave. We did not have permission to leave. We packed up and left, and with what we were able to put in some suitcases in a car, and landed at Pearson with $50 in my father's pocket. And that was all we had. And because we had left without permission, we had no way to go back. So
Right.
it was, I was leaving the people, I was leaving the country, I was not going back ever.
Mhm.
This is not we were basically refugees.
Mhm. Yeah.
So to get back to your question, I tried not to think about what could have been and what if, because it would have driven me crazy, I think.
Mhm.
I just, I found the one road, and the road had the big thing that said med school at the end of it. And I just kept going that way, and I never looked back.
Yeah.
Was it at a cost? Probably. But it's not something that I've dwelled on.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something I could examine in another memoir or another book, but
Yeah.
I don't think I have an answer other than that.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I felt that too. In that, in a lot of your experiences, there was a pushing against not just who you were as a Polish immigrant, but who you were expected to be, who you were expected to become, who your father was expected to become, and that division, I guess, reminded me, or the battle, I guess, reminded me a lot about the experience of writing. And I wanted to talk to you about writing this memoir because, in sitting down and writing a short story, you've got this, on one side, I want to write something super impressive. And then you write it and you think, wow, that's amazing. And then 2 days later, you look at it and think,
It's the
oh
bits.
my God, it's garbage. Or you get, 10 rejections or whatever. And so there's always this, not necessarily division, but this kind of like split personality. And you talk about that in going to med school and becoming and getting the best grades and becoming an honor student. And so I wanted to talk to you specifically from a writerly perspective. How did you deal with those battling voices in writing the truth, in writing your own experiences, some quite intimate and emotional?
Hmm. Well, there were two parts to my writing. One was the vomiting on the page.
Mhm.
I literally wrote 60,000 words during
Wow.
NaNoWriMo in 2018, when I had decided that September that I was going to, it was from my MFA, and I decided that it wasn't going a collection of short stories for my master's thesis, but a memoir. And I did a 180 and I started writing a memoir, and it all just poured out.
Wow.
So there was that, and I wasn't thinking. When you write like that, you don't think. And I was lucky that I didn't think, because yes, the doubts and the critic on the left shoulder that I always turn and go, well,
Yeah.
something that I can't really quite say in public. I'm writing here, you do that.
Yeah.
They were just totally silenced. But when it came to rewriting, that the voices were there. And I had read I read one excellent book on writing memoir, which is The Art of Memoir by Mary Carr. And there was, and I kept on saying that, you have to be vulnerable.
Mhm.
You have to, for the reader to buy what you're saying, you have to show your vulnerability. Because if you're writing a memoir to tell everybody, well, you're a rock star and you're the greatest, and they're just
Yeah.
going to say, and they're going to pick up another book. And I'm not the rock star and I'm not the greatest. I just wanted people to see what my life was about. I had two main reasons, I think, to write that memoir. One was to show people how difficult clinical genetics is, because clinical genetics is has a bit of a, I don't know, I always had the feeling that we're not appreciated by some other clinicians, by
Right.
some other specialists, because we don't do anything. Because we can't do anything. We don't treat, we don't cure. So to show how difficult genetics, especially prenatal genetics, can be. And the other one was to show how writing has saved my sanity.
Mhm.
Those were the two messages that I wanted to sort of put there. And I wrote to them.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't going to hold anything back because I had to show how low I had fallen or sunken or whatever with my hospitalization and my illness. And I had to show, because only then can you really see how much writing has helped me to get me out of that and prevent me from ever going back there again.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two things I wanted to get across.
Yeah. And another challenge, another split, I guess, another challenging thing was your experience of your own mental health. And I meant to make a note of you called them your funny spells. I can't remember.
Yes.
Yeah. And how, how in your 20s, how in your teens and then your 20s and your 30s, how you experienced these funny spells. And in relation to when you were in the hospital for 5 weeks, and there's a line where you say you didn't care anymore what people thought, something like that, that you were just, this is it, like no more stigma, no more anything. Was that a natural evolution, like, because society itself, we've opened up more to the idea of mental health and the spectrum of even bipolar, right, the spectrum of mental illnesses. Do you think that your evolution and your thought process with your own illness mirrored society, or was that something you were consciously growing, nurturing within yourself?
I think a little bit of both. I think society, I mean, the society is more, I'm not going to go as far as to say accepting, but maybe understanding of differences. I was open about being diagnosed with bipolar disorder even before I was hospitalized. People knew about it, and there's this part there that you can read about it in my book, where I was actually it's kind of cool to have bipolar disorder because so many brilliant people had it. Well, it wasn't so cool when I ended up in the throes of depression and hospitalized, but anyway, I've always taken my meds and will never stop taking my meds. I don't want to be, a free spirit that breaks through all of the societal norms, because that doesn't let you function and be productive, and and be the person that I want to be. So I have been very lucky because working at a hospital, I've never had any problems with illness, what do you call it?
Leave or
Leave for, like, it wasn't mental health day. It was an actual, I was off for 4 months at one point. Well, after the hospitalizations, I didn't go back for a few months because it was recommended by my psychiatrist. And there was never any question about me losing my job, losing my position, losing anything. And everybody has been very supportive and wonderful. I do know that is not the norm.
Yeah.
That is not the norm. I have been very lucky to have had that. So, society is still probably a little bit behind what needs to be done for people. And I have been also very fortunate. I mean, with, stable family life and a job, and many of the psychiatric diagnoses, whether it's depression, bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia, some of the best predictors of good outcome is, stable family, family supports, social supports, poverty versus having a living wage and all of that. And that is just as important as medication or psychiatric therapy for people. So, it's still, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. And that, I mean, I'm sure you could talk about your husband, Jim, for days, but there were so many scenes in this book, and it's hard to convey the emotional depth, because I feel also lucky and blessed to have a partner who would be much like Jim. But there are some very intimate scenes that you share that aren't just a window opening into your life, but also a peek into who Jim is as a person. And family is a big part of this book. I mean, he's referenced, your sons are referenced, your mom and dad are referenced, Monica is referenced. And I wanted to talk to you about, in writing memoir, the challenge that I always think exists must be the family's experience of your truth, the family's experience of what may be their truth that they didn't know at the time. Have the boys read it?
Yes.
Yes.
I made sure that Jack read the parts about him
I was going
and
to ask
vetted them, and I was not going to write anything without it. I mean, he's an adult, and he needs to, I needed his permission, and I did get his permission. My little guy is not mentioned there a lot because he was not part of that big turmoil, but I mean, he's there. He was always there. So yeah, it's important to have it. Annie Lamott said something. Anne Lamott. I always mix her up with Annie Dillard. Anne Lamott said, "If people didn't want me to write about them, they should have behaved better." Well, I do not quite subscribe to that. There is some truth to that. However, you want to burn bridges, sure, but that wasn't my goal with it. So whether it's family members or other people, I did a lot of feints in there. I mean, there are some people that are not mentioned at all that I could have, again, write chapters about, and not at all complimentary, and I chose not to. And if they're not in my book, it might be because they didn't behave well.
Right. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm gonna branch off because I have two ideas that are popping into my head. I want to talk to you about motherhood, Jack specifically being your firstborn. But I also want to talk to you about the people behaving badly thing. There are some awkward, if not overtly disgusting behavior in the beginning from some senior people in your world. And I'm glad actually that you said that. It's nice to hear. It would be nice. I bet a lot of those people would look for themselves in your book and then not find their name and respond probably with their ego being bruised. But I wanted to talk to you now as a doctor, as an educator, how those experiences, because there were a number of challenging ones in your early education, how those experiences have been brought forth to your current role as a doctor educator.
Well, I certainly do my best not to repeat those mistakes, not to do what was done to me. But it's a moving target, and I do have to say, because we had the certain level, there was a certain level of expectations on us 30, 40 years ago when we were training, and it has changed, it has shifted, and the expectations now for trainees are quite different. So I might be on my best behavior for somebody who was, I might be a saint perceived by somebody who was a trainee in the 80s, and I may be perceived as too demanding and exacting by the current trainees. So you try your best, you try your best. I mean, the most important thing is respect, because, I mean, just because I'm a third-year medical student and the person is a world-class leader in X, Y, and Z doesn't mean that you treat me with, I'm still a person.
Yeah.
And that was definitely missing in that particular interaction. So that's what I do when I teach. When I interact with trainees, whether it's medical students or residents or fellows. I think it just boils down to that, respect what they are and respect what they bring to the table. I have learned so much from my students that I know never happened to those almighty teachers of mine back in the 80s, because they would never allow themselves to be taught anything by underling.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and a couple of episodes do happen where some seniors take credit for work that you did. Yeah. Motherhood is a powerful. And again, as a mother, my experience of this book might differ from a lot of other people, but Jack specifically, there's a section where you talk about his baby book, his memory book, and the list of things that could potentially be wrong with him as
Yeah,
as a geneticist.
yeah,
And I was so, I mean, I kind of laughed, but I was also in my mind thinking, how does a like prenatal pediatric diagnostician in genetic malformations and such even ponder having a baby? I can't imagine that emotional
yeah.
journey.
Um, I do go into about that in the book, and I was doing, when I was pregnant with Jack, I was in my last year of my genetics fellowship, and I was preparing for my fellowship exam, or 2.5 years of training, 3 years of training. You sit an exam to be certified as a clinical geneticist. And I had to study all these things.
Mm-hmm.
I had to study all the things that can happen to a child. And I did it because I didn't know I was pregnant. What happened
Right.
was, and that's in the book, I studied. We had a written exam in May and then an oral exam in September. And I found out that I was 7 weeks pregnant a week before my written exam, at which
Yeah.
point I was just reviewing. So I finished the reviewing, I wrote the exam, and then I said, I'm not doing any more reading and studying until I get my ultrasound and
Yeah.
until I get my blood testing for prenatal screening. It was a different type of screening that is available now. It was very
Mhm.
basic. And I didn't study. I just worked. I went to the hospital. I did my work in clinics, but I didn't think about stuff.
Right.
There were moments when I was reminded of the fact that I was pregnant, and here I was learning about these possible things that can happen
Yeah.
to a boy, because I knew it was a boy. And I just kind of said, I'm not going to think about it because I will go crazy, and I would stop.
Yep.
So I went through that. Ultrasound was okay. Screening was okay. And then I studied for my oral exam, and somehow I did it. People do ask that. And there was a wonderful thing that I write in there from a mother. When I was pregnant with a second child, I always felt, when I was doing prenatal genetics, that women who would see me walking into the room when they were there with a pregnancy affected with something, there's me walking in with my pregnant belly, and what do they think and how do they feel, and it would be going through my mind. I actually thought they hated me because
Yeah.
supposedly I would appear that I was having a normal pregnancy, and there they were with something awful. Probably most of them never even, because they were so upset and so preoccupied with
With
their
their
own situation, they probably didn't even notice I was pregnant. But one woman did notice, and 10 years later she wrote me an email saying that, I saw the son, and I was reassuring because what the child had was not affecting cognition and development, that I was reassuring that, he would need surgery, but he would be fine. And she sent me a note she sent me an email with a photo of him,
Mhm.
and telling me that she was thinking at the time, how could I be doing this job?
Right.
And I said, oh,
Exactly.
and how she was feeling for me.
Mhm.
There I was feeling for her because she had a baby with a birth difference. And there she was feeling for me about having to do this. And it was just such a wonderful thing. And I wrote back to her, and I actually saw that boy a few years
Yeah.
later on a baseball field, because he was playing my little ones, because we were both pregnant at the same time. So the little
Yeah.
one was playing his team in baseball. And again, I saw her, she gave me a big hug, and it was just such a wonderful experience.
Yeah, that was a great scene. That kind of full circle, knowing the boy before he was born and then seeing him on the baseball field. That was so beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, and there's another family in this book that is honestly for everybody if you haven't read it, I mean, this is probably the number one reason I will tell everyone to read this story. There's a family who I'm just so moved get to exist in your book, and I'm hoping that you can talk about them, Shannon and Shane and Savannah, and your experience with her, not necessarily witnessing her growing up, but your experience with the family was so powerful. How, and I guess in what we were talking about before everyone joined, in someone else saying to you that having people in this, mentioning patients and having patients in this book is some kind of, immoral decision on your part, but having them in there is such a powerfully important part of the book.
So this is a little girl that I met when her mom was pregnant with her at about 20, about 5 months pregnancy. And she had multiple birth differences that affected her skeleton. She was very, very tiny, very, very, I have to use these words, very abnormal looking, very malformed, because she was completely different than what, a baby would look like. And she remained very tiny throughout her life. And I followed her during their pregnancy. And then when she was born, I was having a really hard time because I thought that this little girl was suffering and that she was having a difficult life. She was in the ICU for over a year. She celebrated her first birthday in the ICU because she needed a ventilator. Her lungs were too small. She finally went home, and while I was supportive of the family while they were pregnant, and the family was very, very, very grateful for that, when she was born, I changed, and the parents picked up on it. I mean, it doesn't, it was, and there was a bit of a dissonance and the distancing. And then, but I was always walking around in the hospital whenever I would see her in my clinic or I would see her in the hospital, and I would be very upset about it. And, there she is, she's suffering. She can't walk. She can't talk because she's got the tube down her throat, all of that. And I just put her blinkers on, and that's all I saw. And it took me quite a few years of talking to people and writing, actually, to realize that her life was actually quite wonderful, and she was loved. She loved people. She brought joy to many, many people in her life. I didn't allow her to bring joy into my life, and that was my failing. And I did a lot of soul searching after a certain point in my life, and then Savannah died. She had an accident and she died. She was 11 or 13. I can't remember right now. But she was in her early teens. And then I did my hard work, and then I reached out to her mother, and I was telling her that I've changed and I have a different viewpoint. And by the way, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then I saw her again a few years later when I was writing the memoir, and actually it was wonderful the first time I saw her. We met in a restaurant and in the city, and she had flowers for me, and she said they're from Savannah, and they're yellow because it's Savannah's favorite color, and there's a little tulle butterfly in there because Savannah loved butterflies. And I just you could have knocked me over with a feather.
Yeah.
So when I was writing the book, I knew that Savannah was going to be a huge, huge, huge part of it. If it was, and I reached out to Shannon and told her about it, asking for her permission. And I got the permission from her and from Shane, but I made sure that they read it, because I previously also wrote a piece, and I read them read it, and I know Shane was very upset about it. And I said, make sure, I said to Shannon, I've never spoken to Shane, but I said to Shane, make sure it's okay with Shane. I want to make sure it's okay with Shane. I don't want to hurt him any more than he was already. And again, Shannon and Jack, Savannah's younger brother, whose pregnancy I also followed, came to my book launch. With a yellow flower again, and all of that. So it was a wonderful thing, and it taught me so much. And I'm so grateful that Shannon had the big heart to allow me to share my story with respect to Savannah, and in a way share Savannah's story, fragment of Savannah's story, the one that I saw and that affected my life.
Yeah, it was so beautiful. It really was. And I thank them for allowing us to have that little glimpse into their lives too. Kaylee's going to be taking questions. I just have a couple of more questions. I hope that you'll indulge me, but please put in the chat any questions that you have for Margaret, and we'll address those. I wanted to talk to you about the photographs because there's one kind of, lingering thing at the end of the book. Photographs themselves are such an important part of your education, your experience as a geneticist in seeing the photos. And there's a moment in the book where you talk about you have the, epiphanical moment where you suddenly see details in the photographs that you didn't see before. The stuffies, the Spider-Man underwear, and all of the non-pathological details, of the photographs. So 2 questions. One is, how did that in seeing the details and knowing how important those details were to the photographs or the experience as a doctor of the photographs, how did that impact your writing? And 2, the slides. I'm interested to know what you're going to do with those slides.
Okay. Well, let's answer the second question because I think it's a little easier. The slides are being digitized, but I still don't know what I'm going to do.
Right.
I have what Allison is referring to is a stack of about 7 3-inch binders with Kodachrome slides in them, which are completely obsolete technology now, but that's, we take photographs of our patients to document features and to share information with other physicians. Now they are all digital photographs, and I've been using digital photography for quite a while. Well, 20 years almost, 20. Yeah, 20, whenever it first came out and became reasonably affordable. But I still had slides from my training, and I don't know what to do with them. And because I don't have permission to do anything other than use them for documentation and sharing with other physicians, I may have to destroy them.
Right.
Because there's nothing else that I can do with them. I mean, there are people's faces in there, and I can't use them for anything other than those 2 reasons. And there's hundreds of individuals there that I can't reach out and reach out to and get permission for. The other one, well, when I was training, we did not, we constantly, we get this tunnel vision, and we don't see things that we don't want to see. So, the fact that the little girl had a polka dot dress with a little white collar, it didn't matter because all I looked was with her chin and her head, and anything else was extraneous. It was when I realized, and it was Annie Dillard this time, because she actually used the same book to write a very, very a superb collection of essays. And she was referencing one of the genetics textbooks. And reading her, I realized that I would go back and look for it, and I go, oh, I missed it. Mm-hmm. And it's actually a common occurrence, if not a problem, that doctors see what they want to see.
Yeah.
So, for example, I mean, just to illustrate it, a surgeon, an orthopedic surgeon, is asked to see a woman in emergency and to fix her foot, which she has broken slipping on ice. And then he goes out and talks to the emergency physician, and she says, well, how's her pregnancy? And he goes, she's pregnant?
Yeah.
He fixed her foot, put a cast on it. He never noticed that she was eight months pregnant, because he was just looking at the foot and fixing the foot.
Yeah.
That is an issue, and it's an issue that is actually being addressed with, visual arts training, to train doctors to do that.
To see more than
to see more than
they're diagnosing,
because you will only see what you're looking for.
Mhm.
and you have to start looking broader, and that's part of our field.
Yeah. And how did that impact your writing? Not just necessarily writing the memoir, but your fiction writing and your other narrative.
Well,
Whether
it broadened my horizon in sort of in examining any situation from more than just one vantage point, and trying to put myself, not just this way, but this way and this way and this way, and sort of maybe even putting it upside down and inside out. So yeah, definitely did that. Yeah.
Nice. And what you're writing a collection of essays right now that Wolsak and Wynn is also going to be publishing in 2024, Life and Medicine, and it's described as an essay collection, but what are they referencing case reports? Are they just experiential essays? What do you expect? I'm also super excited about that, by the way. But
Thank you. Well, we went through it with Noelle Allen, who's the publisher, and it's the life part has expanded and the medicine part has really shrunk.
Right.
So there's going to be just a few things about medicine, and the rest of the things are actually totally unrelated to medicine. But one of them may be actually an essay on medical photography.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't written that one yet. It was
Yeah.
one of the things that I've been meaning to write for quite a while.
Yeah, that I would love to hear that. We've experienced that. My son has a facial difference, so we actually know the medical photographer at Sick Kids, and because we've seen him so many times. And
Is it still in Elm Wing on the 8th floor?
no, because he would come to plastic surgery or to dermatology. So we
The reason why I mention is because I write about it in my book.
yeah, no,
I'm gonna go to Elm Wing, take the elevator.
it's such a fascinating job, and I've always asked them anytime we've seen them how incredibly important it is, but also how fascinating it must be to be able to see through a camera and witness a child's experience, or witness a family's experience.
Yeah.
Kaylee, do we have any questions?
Yes, I have a question that I am sharing from Hadil. I hope I said your name right. It says, hello, thank you so much for sharing your life story and being vulnerable. It will have a powerful and helpful effect on many people. As a physician who was recently diagnosed with bipolar disorder and trying to walk the line between what I consider my superpower and a severe depression, I am in awe of your courage. I wonder if you would be so kind as to offer advice on balancing the two and how you reached the decision to take medication.
Sorry, on balancing
the two. So on balancing the kind of superpower versus the depression, and how you reached the decision to take medications.
I have I write about it in detail when I was first diagnosed. Mine is bipolar disorder type 2, not type 1. So the less severe one but my depressions have been quite profound. And because I had such a tremendous response to the medication, when I suddenly, about 3 weeks into taking SSRIs, I realized that, oh my God, for the first time in my life, I'm not walking around feeling awful and with a cloud and the hamsters going. There was no question that I will never stop taking the SSRIs. Then there was for the mood stabilizer, I was tried on a number of medications until I was finally put on one that's worked for me for the last 11 years. And so I've been through the training, but there's no question that I would stay on my meds because they have made me happier. And I don't like saying more productive because, when you're hypomanic, you can do so much more. You can go on 3 hours of sleep and write, I don't know, whatever, 5 papers and publish 4 of them in a month. But it was at a tremendous, in my case, it was also combined with severe irritability. So I was hypomanic with irritable mood, and I did it for my family. Plus, I was also myself sick and tired of being so crabby, bratty, awful, yucky, and I just had to. I was making people around me miserable with my hypomanic moods. After a while, at first it's great, and then the third week, the fourth week, it was just misery. I was just a miserable, unpleasant person, and they were suffering. So that was the reason why I decided to take my medications, even though and I described it, there was a struggle. And then when I saw the effects of the SSRIs, and I said, that's great. And then needed to find medication that would prevent me from descending into depression. And I finally found one after about 10 years of trying different meds. But I was always willing to do it. And I wanted to, and I know this is not a popular word these days, but I wanted to be normal. I'm not normal. I guess I'm neuroatypical, but I so wanted to be whatever the normal meant, which in my case, I realize is productive and happy and taking care of my kids and taking care of being a good wife to my husband. That was the decision.
I hope that that helps answer your question. It goes without saying, I think that Margaret's experience is her personal experience, and that not a recommendation to do one thing or the other. But
that's for sure.
Yeah, I think reading Chasing Zebras will be definitely a beneficial experience for anyone with bipolar. We have one more question before we do the raffle, Kaylee.
Yeah, our last question for the day. Your work seemingly revolves so much around science and hard facts and very left brain modalities. Did you find it easy to tap into a more creative part of you in writing the memoir? How did you find the process of writing?
So I have to take you back to answer this question. I have to take you back 20 years, because that was when I wrote my first book, and I wrote it in Polish. I've published 2 books in Polish, and one is on genealogy and the other one is in genetics and in family trees and genealogy. And I like to say that when I was writing the book on genealogy, which had nothing to do with science, nothing to do with genetics, had all to do with social sciences and other things, I like to say that I literally felt my right brain engaged.
Wow.
And it engaged, and it was such it didn't, of course it didn't, but I like saying that because I was using different parts that I never used before, and I was thinking differently, and I was writing it, and I was loving it and enjoying it. And so the science part helped with a number of things when I was doing genealogy. But the right brain feeling was so heady and so fun that I was writing in Polish because I never thought I could write in English. And then when I started doing it in English, it came back, and and again, it's a completely different feeling than studying medicine. It was fun.
Yeah, those sections on the workshops with Catherine and you sharing your work with everyone, those are also great for any writers listening to this. Those are great moments to read. Thank you so much, Margaret.
Thank you for having me.
This was incredible. I so appreciate your openness and your willingness to sit and talk to me about Chasing Zebras. I'm excited for 2 people who are here to win their very own copy. If you have read it, you can still email me and maybe nominate someone else that you'd like to gift it to. It does cost probably about $10 to $12 to mail. So if you're thinking about getting it and then mailing it off, you might want to just divert it and have Wolsak and Wynn directly send it to whomever you're nominating. But you can email me at junctionwrites@gmail.com with your name and address of where you would like Noelle to have the book sent. Kaylee, drum roll.
All right. Our first winner for the evening is Amanda, okay, Fulashtar. I might be saying that wrong. This is always the worst part about digital, is I haven't had the chance to hear someone say it out loud yet. So Amanda, congratulations. You are the first winner for today.
Yay.
And our second winner, okay, I might say it wrong again, but it's Hadil Ayub. So congratulations to you both. And I will post the email in the chat so you know how we can get your copy to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. I do want to reference back to the 2-category shortlist for the Hamilton Literary Awards. Those are taking place on Monday, December 12th. At 7 p.m. at the Theater Aquarius's Norman and Louise Hawk Studio Theater in Hamilton. You can get tickets. Kaylee's going to put a link to the event in the chat, so you can just click on it and buy tickets to go to that event and meet some other incredible Hamilton authors, and hopefully see Margaret win in one of these categories. That would be great. Yeah. Exactly. And congratulations. I mean, even being shortlisted.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
2
If I just
categories,
may
great.
say one thing, if anybody has any questions that you would like to ask me, you can reach me through my website, which is margaretnowaczyk.ca. So www.margaretnowaczyk.ca. You do have to figure out how to write my last name. But it pops up.
Kaylee has put it in the chat. Sorry.
And I'll be happy to answer any questions. There's a sort of mail feature there. Thank you so much for everybody for coming and listening. And I hope it was useful, and reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you
so much, Allison.
Thank you, really and truly. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Kaylee, once again, thank you so much for all that you do.
Kaylee.
And have a great night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.